The Beverly Hills mansion did not sleep. Even when the family within it lay still, the air stirred with secrets. Chandeliers trembled without a draft, portraits watched too long. To strangers, the place was luxury incarnate. To the Menendez sons, it was a reliquary of commands and punishments, a palace built to contain. Lyle walked its halls at night, barefoot, the marble biting his skin. Even when Jose Menendez was away, his voice bled from the walls, orders, insults, the bright, brittle clang of power. Kitty drifted through rooms like perfume without a body, a smile lacquered over a fracture no one mended. Erik woke in whispers. The ceiling breathed, the mirrors rippled. He was young in all the ways that mattered, and the darkness was not empty, it recited. Their fortune gleamed across the city, but inside the house the foundation was rot. The brothers carried it like a fever in the blood. The house listened. The house waited. All cages break eventually, but never without blood. Erik could not find the seam between memory and dream. Shadows gathered at the foot of his bed, broad-shouldered and breathless, a silhouette that dissolved when he dared to look. At practice he froze mid-swing, his father's voice sneering from the echo of the ball. In restaurants he laughed too loudly, in hallways he whispered to no one. At night he confided in Lyle, soft, furtive things offered like contraband. "Will it ever stop?" he asked. Lyle answered with a silence sharp enough to cut. Erik understood, his brother carried the same weight, but wore it like armor. Erik's fear melted, Lyle's hardened. There were guns in their thoughts now, cold, metallic promises. Erik feared their weight, yet craved the way they suggested an end. The house seemed to guide them in labyrinthine loops, always back to the same door. Where Erik drowned, Lyle learned to breathe. He mapped the mansion like a tactician, the creak in the second stair, the hour the servants left, the tilt of a glass from first drink to fourth. He catalogued vulnerabilities the way other men collected art. Beneath the composure lay a slow, molten rage, at the father who commanded, the mother who vanished inside her smile, the younger brother who trembled, the self who stayed. He chose weapons the way he chose words, for yield. Scenarios ran through his mind as clean equations. Erik faltered, Lyle pressed. He bent fear into obedience, wove alibis like wire. The true prize was money, his money. All that he actually cared about, finally would be theirs. It was payment for all the pain and suffering, and he owed it to them for what they had been through. He did not really believe the voice would become silent, but he had to try to make it stop, for Erik and for himself. The money would be a mere gesture of retribution. Still, in the mirror, a second reflection lingered behind his own, a watchful, unblinking presence. The plan was set. Cages break with a sound the walls never forget. The mansion breathed differently that night. The chandeliers were 1,000 patient eyes, the palms outside held their breath. In the den, the television painted the room with artificial daylight. Kitty's laugh tinked like a glass about to crack. Jose spoke in the register that made rooms obey. Lyle nodded, the signal. Thunder split the air. Smoke shook itself into existence. Jose staggered, the empire of his voice collapsing mid-syllable. Kitty's cry rose, animal and human at once, and vanished. Shots became a rhythm, not sound, but impact. Curtains soaked in shadow. Carpets learned a new color. Then silence, heavier than before. Lyle's breath came measured, a hinge somewhere shifted as if the house were turning in its sleep. Erik dropped the gun and folded, the roar still screaming in his skull. The house listened, and by listening, remembered. Smoke curled around crystal like a ribbon that refused to let go. The television murmured on, indifferent to the dead. Lyle assessed the ruin with a surgeon's blank stare. Freedom tasted like metal. He had expected a clean sky, he met a ceiling thick with powder and guilt. Erik stared at Kitty's eyes, which would not close in his mind even when they closed on the floor. His sobs came low, then broke their leash. Lyle hissed control, and control scuttled across the marble like something living. They wiped and arranged and rehearsed, brittle words for a brittle world. Outside, the neighborhood slept, untroubled. Inside, time fractured, and the brothers walked out carrying the house with them, the smoke, the gaze, the new, red geometry of the den. The city cooed over orphans in silk. Cameras blinked. Reporters leaned close. For a time, their grief became a currency that spent well. Lyle moved through boutiques with a sovereign's posture. Erik followed, drowning guilt in velvet nights. Rolexes ticked like small, expensive hearts. But masks sweat. Whispers collected in corners. Too polished, murmured the court of Beverly Hills. Too rehearsed? Lyle lay awake, composing counters to questions not yet asked. Erik woke screaming, blood on his bitten tongue. Every mirror accused. Every car window reflected a third passenger. Each purchase gleamed like a confession no one had yet translated. Their fortune glared, their fraud thinned in the light. Detectives arrived with soft shoes and sympathetic pens. Their questions circled back like birds of prey. Lyle heard the pattern first, not listening for answers, but for cracks. Erik was a cathedral of hairline fractures. Grief, when observed too closely, becomes theater. Their performances frayed. The house resumed its murmur inside them, the creak of a remembered step, the cold certainty of a father's gaze. "Control yourself," Lyle said, and Erik nodded, and did not. The investigators returned, patient as tide. The city watched. The walls in the brothers' minds leaned in. Erik's nights lengthened into fever. Voices would not permit sleep. When it came, it arrived armed. He began to speak in fragments, to a therapist, to the quiet, to the parts of himself he hoped might still be clean. Words cut their way out, plans, fear, inevitability. Lyle felt it, the loosening, the spill. He tightened knots, rewove alibis, threatened, pleaded, sharpened. Every word you spill, you kill us again. Erik promised silence and broke it in the same breath. Outside, the detectives adjusted their grip on the net. Inside, the brothers tried to breathe inside different cages. In a quiet room built for safekeeping, Erik's words finally found air. "They're dead because of us," he whispered, the syllables breaking like ice. Once spoken, truth moved with its own momentum. Details followed, ragged and unstoppable. Relief and terror arrived together. Lyle sensed the shift before anyone told him. He saw it in the detective's eyes, felt it in the room's temperature. When Erik confessed to him, Lyle did not flinch. "You've killed us twice," he said, "once with bullets, once with words." Silence ceased to be armor, it became a blade turned inward. The bond that had bound them began to bind them to different fates. The footsteps in the hall were not a surprise, they were a summons. Cuffs clicked like a gavel that did not need a bench. Lyle lifted his wrists and did not resist. Calculation rattled in the hollow where control had been. Erik wept, A boy's broken sound in a man's body. Neighbors arrived as if to a premiere, flashbulbs made a storm of light. In the cruiser, Erik fogged the glass with breath and whispered, "They'll never leave us." Lyle watched the horizon as if a strategy might rise from it. It did not. The courtroom was a cathedral wired for spectacle. The brothers sat together, separated by the distance between stone and salt. Witnesses became mediums. Allegations burned like incense, discipline branded as terror, intimacy recast as invasion, the mansion rebuilt in testimony, its marble, its mirrors, its muffled cries. Which séance would the jury believe? Victims who struck back. Killers draped in rags of pain. Erik's voice cracked open and did not stop, his past spilled across the floor with the ferocity of someone who wants both absolution and annihilation. Lyle watched his narrative unspool, jaw locked against the betrayal of tears. Outside, headlines fed. Inside, the house attended in silence, present in every pause, gleaming in every remembered chandelier. The jury filed in like pallbearers. The foreman spoke the word that tolls, guilty. It hung in the air like iron, weighty and ringing. Erik collapsed inward, hands shaking around a boy who still lived somewhere in him. Lyle remained upright while something quiet broke where no one could see. Chains replaced watches. The theater swallowed its actors. As they were led away, they felt the mansion, miles distant, intimately near, settle back into itself. The marble kept its secrets. The chandeliers trembled and then were still. Iron doors closed. The brothers ceased to be heirs or arguments, they became echoes of the children they once were before they lost that innocence to the horror of abuse and then at last the blood they spilled. And far away, the house listened. The house remembered. The house, like all fortunes founded on fraud, kept perfect, merciless time.